so worry, and my tip, and I bet you will know. I bet you will know the better one so gay.
Conso sangore, and my back, I be me war. I bet you will know the better one so gay.
So worry, and my tip, and I bet you will know. I bet you will know the better one so gay.
So so I and my yam get a be me war. I bet you will know the better one so
so worry, and my tip, and I bet you will know. I bet you will know the better one so
very President General one thought that very afteruna with the modern people can say we in front of I'm not very bandika una silver if only yielding a savini or any jingo wayan it's a earlier it's a local for the car in a very towny follow kai one in your ferraki sungin am ya lonye ji mutuni gidram sangare lambara alam so yoni lerigi jumo tao embassy be bomla lonji mapinira ingirishi so I want to thank everybody, my brothers and sisters worldwide. It's an honor for me to share with you this afternoon some discourse which I think is not new. There is nothing new in agriculture. There is nothing that I'm going to say that is written on stone. All what we are doing is work in progress, I believe. And I think that whatever is here will be open for corrections, criticisms, so that we can embellish something that can somehow contribute to the development of all. So, I'll go ahead to talk to somebody that all of us know very well and who has inspired us a lot. For said a long time ago that we must develop and exploit our resources.
Hello.
Without absolutely indispensable needs, knowledge and capital. And all of these are important in the order of
hello.
Even why is about well-being that are
Takufu. Yeah. Hello, Takufu. Are you mom?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, unfortunately, more key online a bit who carry problem. We carry some echo in the background. Not echo, the line would do off some of the show. You really why you are everything while we're young. Because I can also not hear all of it. So more key as if there's as I allow you mom, it won't be there. If not, maybe you try again.
Better?
Okay, try again. Yeah, it sounds
Hello?
much better. Yeah, it's much better here.
Okay, all right. So I'm saying that Folon was sharing the importance of capital and knowledge and emphasizing on the fact that knowledge is more important. But today we can go a step further to say that knowledge is not the most important. It is, they say that knowledge is power, but we can say that knowledge is potential power. Because if you don't translate knowledge into action, then you have not completed your job. So our appeal today is for us to have some action points. The agenda for our discussion is looking crucially at the global economic overview, looking at the case of Cameroon, understanding why banks are shying away from financial institutions, integrating agriculture and value chains with financial value, risk-sharing mechanisms, situation on SOR, and the urgency of now, and then we will conclude. The global economic overview presents some challenges. Of course, there has been drop in world oil prices, persistent geopolitical uncertainty, low financial market sentiment, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, multiplicity of armed conflicts. We're talking about ourselves here and all over. There will be probably some trade escalations, sharp downturns in major economies, financial disruptions in emerging market and developing economies, what you call EMDEs. Xenophobia in South Africa. Now, what are the prospects despite the challenges? There will be growth. It's projected that there will be growth after if at all the crisis abate in the second semester to about 2.5%. It's likely that most countries and organizations will change their way of defining policy. There will be mitigated trade tensions between China and the United States. We know that the IMF has just given moratorium to sovereign debt of about 25 countries. Unfortunately, Cameroon is not one of them. There will be improved research to find out how to contain the virus. And of course, we know that all the end products that we consume medically or the drugs are made from agricultural products. So there will be new technologies as well. Hand washing, we have seen people developing techniques, various techniques. And of course, as the pandemic goes away, we hope that in 2021, the growth rate will go up to about 5.8% of world economic GDP. The World Bank, these are just the forecasts that they are giving, 2.5% by year end. Here, I just shared quickly the GDP per capita, just to show to us that if you look at this slide, you have West Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa. They had negative per capita growth between 2017 and 2019. Of course, you would agree with me that West Africa, when you look at 2017, 2019, West Africa had a positive per capita growth. Why is this so? Of course, we know that Nigeria, which is just next door, so with 200 million people, has an economic giant called Dangote. That guy alone contributes 10%. He contributes 10% of Nigeria's GDP, so we can understand why their per capita is a bit higher. Now, the impact of agriculture. Clearly, we see that the world's population depends 60% on agriculture for survival. It is the central economic development sector following a crisis. So we are in a crisis and the clear truth is that after this crisis, if we don't focus on agriculture, it will be difficult to fast forward our development. This sector, again, the agricultural sector, employs 46% of the workforce in the whole world, 14.1% for industry, and 39.9% for services. We know, again, that this sector is where you have the most child labor, and the average age of entry into this labor force for kids is 5 to 7 years. We all grew up knowing that we have to get up at 5 a.m. with our parents and go to the farm. Today, the case is no longer the case because the human rights are already at our doorsteps. We have to be careful. So we must think ahead and look at other alternatives. So you find that, again, the UN gives a clear statistic which is frightening. Workers under 18 constitute about 129 million the world over, and these are kids. So where in so you still find kids going to the farm instead of resting properly, reflecting, and coming up with inventions that will challenge the rest of the world. We shouldn't have these kids working in the farms. So all of this is still economic data. I wouldn't bore ourselves with all of this. Now, the case of Cameroon, we all know that Cameroon had a growth of 4.1%. Cameroon is the biggest economy in Central Africa, and so on and so forth. And so is part of this of the triangle. You see here graphically represented. Now, this is key to us. When you look at agriculture, you ask yourself, why do banks hesitate to finance this sector? We try to give a few answers. Of course, if you go to, for instance, and ask any bank to go financing somebody, they only look at that small, poor farmer who doesn't have any collateral, who doesn't produce in high quantity. He uses very artisanal methods of farming. He doesn't know how to market his products. When somebody harvests vegetables from Jame, for instance, they cannot sell in Yaoundé within 1 week. They have to sell in the next 2 weeks or 2 days, sorry. Now, we don't have means of conservation, so this is a problem. No banker would focus on that. There is a lot, that's why there is a lot of high post-harvest losses. There's difficulty in accessing farm inputs, fertilizers, pesticides. There is lack of sufficient improved seeds, weak organization by producers, they don't have entrepreneurial skills. There is dilapidated or absence of equipment that they can use, inefficient practices, limited public expenditure on agriculture. Today, Cameroon having signed a convention that obliges countries to invest at least 10% of their investment budget in agriculture. Most African countries are below 6%, and Cameroon is guilty of that. So we know that this sector is not as sticky and attractive as in other countries where banks easily finance. We know that there is limited mechanization. You know, we have talked about insufficient storage and processing facilities, inability of peasant farmers to present viable projects. There is a perceived high cost of financing. Of course, when you are financing in this sector, you know that the losses you can incur, the money you will spend in trying to recover is a lot. Then absence of instruments, financial instruments that are technically designed, and we'll see at the end of the presentation, the proposals that we are making. Then, of course, there is low competitivity. Let us see now, how is agriculture integrated with financial value chains? Agriculture has been viewed critically as an isolated system. But I want us to reflect and look at agriculture as a value chain. You look at agriculture as production, you look at it as transportation, storage, processing, marketing, distribution. This is a value chain. If you don't look at agriculture that way, you will only consider the sector as being very risky and only for the poor and hungry. This is not the case. But if we look at it as a value chain, I'm going to show you in a slide. This slide, if you look at this slide, you see that you have a value chain of producers right up to the distribution. Now, when you look at it as a value chain, then you attack that value chain as a whole, holistically. You are not just going to finance the farmer. When you finance the farmer and he has so much yield, what happens to it? That yield has to be taken off by a huge company. Take, for instance, Guinness. Guinness and brasseries today, they still import corn to Cameroon. But if so were to produce so much corn that these people can buy, then the banks that are financing the salt farmers will be comfortable that Guinness, which is a high-end, a blue chip company, has signed to offtake all the corn that is produced in salt. So those banks that are financing the farmers will no longer be afraid. They will say, okay, we no longer need collateral from the farmers who they don't have land titles. But they have this paper from Guinness saying that we can collect all what you produce. I'm just giving you an example of corn, but it applies to everything: tomatoes, beans, groundnuts. So when we come to the financial value chain, we then make sure that we position instruments along that value chain. We identify financial institutions that can finance only the farmers. And if you go to SAW, you have all the credit unions you can think of. Inver Credit Union, Jacquerie Credit Union, and so on and so forth. They are ready to finance these farmers. And if we build their capacities and show them this, the mitigated risk, they will be ready to participate in this program. Then when you move along the value chain, you see that commercial banks, they will get because commercial banks are up in the middle. They are afraid to come to the villages because they don't have agencies there. But microfinance institutions are there. When you come to transportation and processing, you have those financial actors that are there ready to finance a transporter, ready to finance somebody processing. And then you have the bigger banks that are ready to finance Guinness, Nestle, and all of that. So when you have this integration of the value chains, the agricultural value chain and the financial value chain, then you can begin to talk of transformation in the agricultural sector. You don't look at it again as something for the poor, wretched farmer. Now, what are the risk-sharing finance mechanisms we are trying to propose? The president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesemi, somebody who had worked in Cameroon for 4 years, has said that agriculture is the door to the future for Africans. If you go to Kenya, Kenya's greatest export is fresh flowers. And the financing they are getting from the African Development Bank is huge. That is Kenya. In Cameroon, we have the 5 ecological zones of Africa. That's why we are called Africa Miniature. So you find every climate in Cameroon. If you go to Nsor, you see that it's almost a smaller unit of that Cameroon. Because if you go to Mbok Plain, you have that, that heat. You go to Kai towards Tadru, you have the cold. You go towards there, it is hot, and so on. So if we go and do a proper research of the soils, of the vegetation, and we identify key crops that have high economic value, and say that in a program that SODA is to set up, we can only accompany these species of crops which have high economic value, which means they can be produced in high quantities and sold easily, handled easily. Then we begin to look at that. So here I'm just emphasizing the risk-sharing finance mechanism to say that when you have considered the value chain, agricultural value chain and the financial value chain, then you come now and you say, okay, the financial sector is ready to accompany agriculture. So how will the risk be shared? There will be those local banks that are ready to finance, but they don't have enough capital. There will be insurance companies. Insurance companies have started providing insurance for agriculture in Cameroon. We can contact them. The farmers themselves, they are supposed to share in the risk. If we come with a program to finance them, they should be able to raise at least 10% of the capital. We should be able to provide technical assistance both to the farmers and to the banks that are financing these farmers. Mark you that many banks don't get into this sector because they have not employed specialized employees. They have not trained their employees to master the sector. So we should be able to provide that technical assistance at the level of SODA. This is being done. Schumann and many other organizations are doing this already. It's not something that is new to us. It's something that we can just cut and paste. Now, let us look at the situation of SODA, which is the urgency, I call the urgency of the now. It is about revitalizing the rural economy of SODA through innovative approach to agricultural finance. We term it as such. We can look for other terms. Starting with the renaissance of youth-led agribusiness through risk-sharing finance mechanism. Here is a little fact sheet for you. NSO sits on 1.7 million hectares of land, 3.8% of the national territory. 90% of our food that is consumed is homegrown. 85% of total income in SODA is from sale of agricultural products. 42% of this is contributed by women. And SODA is the largest and most hardworking tribe in the Bamenda grass fields. These are facts. Now, how are we exploiting this? These are just some pictures to show you that this is exactly what is happening in SODA. You see very artisanal way of farming. You see children in the farm, okay? So very little can come up of this. How can we depend 90% on something and then we think that we can use any other sector to, to drive our economy, to fight the poverty and to stop the conflict? What is the rationale of what we're trying to say that SODA should look at agriculture keenly? It is going to build an opportunity for the youth because our focus here is the youth. We're not talking about the entire population. We're looking at the youthful population between the ages of 18 and 35. These are the people that are most vulnerable They are the most politically manipulated. These are people that if we extract and we train them and finance them, give them the resources, they will be able to take action to transform their lives and that of the entire South. There is need for food security in South. Last conference call, it was Sheikh Binfon Edwin, who was clear to emphasize that we don't consume what we produce and we don't produce what we consume. Why is it that in South, for instance, we have toothpick that is imported from Nigeria or from China, rulers that are imported from Nigeria or China? To tell you the truth, these are agricultural products. When you tell somebody working in brasseries, working for Guinness, that they are in agriculture, they are surprised. When you tell a pa selling blankets or clothing in the market that they are in agriculture, they are surprised. But this is agriculture. It is just that they are at the end of the value chain of agriculture. So virtually everything that we do, pharmaceutical products, is all about agriculture. So we need that, and it is urgent for us. There is need for revenue generation and reconstruction on South. It is also going to be an opportunity for us to learn from what is happening in other countries, because this finance mechanism we're trying to propose is already working in other countries. It's working in Nigeria, it's working in Kenya, it's working in the DRC, and so on and so forth. There is a possibility of us benefiting from the vision of the African Development Bank in the future. Not now, but I suppose that if we anticipate, they are doing this in other countries, by the time they come to Cameroon and then to the Northwest and then to South, we will have been practicing something which will just leverage on and move forward. What are the key challenges that we have in South? We have the lack of skills by the youth who are willing to engage in any farmers. Limited access to markets and business information. We don't have it. There is weak supportive policy. The policy in the country needs a bit of embellishment. So through our actions, we can modify that through the councils and through the divisional delegations. There is poor understanding of the barriers to creation of management by the youth. So we need to help them with that. What are the goals and objectives of the program we're trying to propose? We're saying that if we do a pilot project that tackles 750 youth, 30% of which should be female, over the next 3 years, we should be able to create value, to create employment for people. We can be more ambitious, but we are saying that to be conservative. If we say for the next 3 years, every year, we train 250 youths properly, we provide them with capital, the next year we do the same for 250, and so on for 250. And then this 70 will in turn train others. We will see that the multiplier effect from so will be high yielding, you know. So this we'll be able to design and deliver adapted financing and risk sharing mechanisms to our people. We are be able to change counterproductive mindsets, you know, by educating them. We have agri-technicians and bankers and leaders all over the world. If we have to enhance the capacity of these youth, we don't need to have these leaders coming physically to solve. From wherever they are, they can always dial in and provide technical assistance, do capacity building for these youth. All of that can be organized. Now, what are the action steps? We're suggesting that if this vision is bought, a technical committee that comprises of people from all backgrounds can be set up to look at the situational analysis, see what has been done on the ground, because all we are saying is theoretical. In 15, 20 minutes, we cannot cover everything. We know that a lot has been done. This committee will do an analysis of what is there, and then identify financial institutions that are capable of accompanying us in this vision. They will be able to design pillars for risk-sharing mechanism, and then build capacities both for the youth that will recruit and for the banks that will be participating. Then, of course, after we train the youth, we'll be able to provide them business support services when they are ready. And of course, we can now we are just saying the agribusiness revolutionary fund for the youth empowerment. We can call it anything. When this think tank comes together, if at all the vision is bought, we can come up with anything. Then they will identify the sources of funding. In risk sharing, we will identify those banks that want to put money. We will seek for funding from international development agencies. We will look for donations from NGOs. We will look at private investors and so on and so forth. When all of this is done, of course, we can officially launch the fund and then monitor and evaluate for sustainability, and then we communicate properly about it. So just to summarize the phases, we take 12 months to do the institutional analysis, recruit and do incubation for the youth. And set up the fund and the risk sharing mechanism. That would concern the first 250 youths. In the second phase, we launch the program, start disbursing the loans, and then recruit the next 50 set of youth. In the third phase, we do the same thing. We continue evaluation and monitoring, and then we recruit the rest of the 250. That will make 750. And then we continue to roll over. Of course, this, as the youths are reimbursing the funds, is revolving, and we continue to seek funding from international organizations to beef up the fund. Now, what are the outcomes from what we are trying to propose? There will be an emergence of a vibrant youth justice for youth. This will trigger a broad-based agricultural growth, food security, poverty reduction, employment, and so on. Of course, the banks that are participating will negotiate with them to make sure that they
unfortunately, I think, unfortunately, I think we have just lost, thank you for claiming, Yon was giving us a presentation. Let me see.
Hello?
Back. Okay, good. Yeah, your connection went back, but you are back. You can share your screen and continue. Yeah, sorry.
So I was saying that we have a problem that exists between cattle rearers and farmers. Why should this exist? Again, the cow dung, just consider the cow dung from the cattle. Okay, replace that with fertilizer, and you see us moving towards organic farming. This cow dung today in the whole onslaught is being dropped, it is wasted, it is fertilizing wheat, whereas we need them. If you go part of the fund and you tell these cattle rearers, or you tell some youth that your job is just to collect this cow dung and dump wherever, and we make sure that none of this waste goes unused in the whole of, I'm just talking of cow dung. Other dungs exist, call it whatever. So this is again part of the value chain. We let that be used. We can also influence policy. As I said, we should be able. Once we start doing this, the councils are now decentralized. They have enough leverage to participate in this program. So they have even funding that should be pumped into things like this at the level of the subdivision. There will be a transformation. There will be a revolution. This is what we are already doing. But there is a difference. We try to structure it in a way that have exemplary leadership in it. There will be scientific innovations. Why do we look at something like a goosey? Let me just take an example. A goosey, for instance, is a high value crop or yield.
Yeah.
But then you realize that it is so difficult, it's so hard to crack a goose.
Hello, thank you for Clement.
Somebody invented a machine for cracking a goose. People are inventing.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello? Yes.
Yeah,
I can get
sorry.
you.
Yeah, sorry. We'll see your slide. Please share your slide again. Sorry about that.
Really?
Yeah, I think it went off, so I think no one is,
Okay.
the slide is not available. And then, sorry about.
Let me see. Oh, technical issues.
Okay.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Let me see quickly. I didn't touch anything. 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that good?
I think it's coming. Good. Yeah, quite good.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So we're saying that we should be able to develop ourselves with pride. We can't have a sector that contributes 90% to the entire income of our tribe, and we don't use it to develop ourselves. We're still hand to mouth and struggling to make ends meet. But this is not right. We are guilty of something. Okay. I went to Mbopland sometimes, and when I sat in the middle of a forest and a lady printed, using solar energy, printed a document, typed and printed a document that is cleaner than anything I've ever seen in Yaoundé, I told myself that why do we have sunshine and we're, hunting for electricity from some faraway land? How can we employ what nature has given us, the sun, to drive turbines and machines to pull water from Irene? And water, do irrigation in that plain line there, fallow for years. That go on to one these used to work, and we get the results immediately. There is no way the African Development Bank or the World Bank will see such an effort and will still be lagging behind. We should stop waiting for any government anywhere to ever do this thing. It is important for us to look at it differently and know that it is in our hands. Of course, when these things come, we'll be speaking and sharing. We're able to look like this. People are already at individual and institutional level in SOC, but it is not scaled up. When we talk of agriculture, I'm limiting to crops, but we can do the same across the board. And we know fully well that we have been focusing animal husbandry to cows. And cow meat is clearly poisonous. If the medics in-house can correct me, okay? We can get proteins from fish farming. And fish farming must not be artisanal fish ponds that we used to know. I hear that in 3 square meters, you can rear about 5,000 fishes in 3 months. Okay? Somebody in his backyard in SOC can produce this. We use our solar energy to store it using refrigerating systems and sell to SOC people at a cheaper rate. Don't ask me why I know all of this and I'm not able to do it myself. The truth is that, not one hand can tie a bundle. And I think that there are more capable people. People are already doing this even out of Cameroon that are SOC people, and we can employ this and make ourselves better. Look at rabbits here. It's white meat. People are rearing rabbits just, very tiny proportions in SOC, whereas this is a sector that is critical. It can be part of the program we're talking about so that we begin to change the health of our population. Okay? I was saying that Shea Dinfon Ejun was clear. We have medicinal plants that are coming up now, and we are venerating other tribes and other areas for cultivating them. These things can be grown in SOC. When somebody shared to me the quality and the sizes of apples that are grown in Shison at his backyard, I was shocked. But we buy apples very expensive elsewhere. Nsoro can produce this. It is clear now that cocoa can do well in Nsoro. Okay, so these are the things that we should be able to do to enhance the health of our people, to enhance their economic dispensations, and make them more proud of what they do, you know. So we are looking at this program and saying that we should tackle everybody. If we look at youth between 18 and 35, it will be specific and our objectives will be clear. And these youths must first of all be interested in agribusiness. We shouldn't take somebody who's interested in riding bikes. And I know many of them are doing all of those things because nothing structural has been presented to them. If we present a clear alternative that is bringing many of them together, I will tell you one thing. In all the plantation farms we have in the littoral and central regions in Cameroon, most of the workers come from Dongamantu and Bul. These guys, most of them even have full houses in these places. These are laborers, these are very useful resources that are coming away, going out of Nsoro. They come for greener pastures, and they pass into these bushes that are even worse than Nsoro. Whereas we could present to them the same thing, they will stay where life is cheaper for them, and they are able to produce more. The statistics are very clear. Okay, so these are the eligibility criteria that we've been able to put together. A technical team can look at it and embellish it, you know. And then we tried now to illustrate what risk-sharing finance mechanism is all about. If we take the example of a farmer called Mr. Lucon, for instance, he's in Bear, and he needs a loan of 1 million francs, you know, to expand on his production. Well, of course, this fund that Soda might create will say, okay, Mr. Lucon, you need 1 million francs, but at least show us that you are ready to take risk, to share in this risk. Present 10% of what you need. Let us block it in the bank. The cooperative that has decided to participate, let's say Jakiri Credit Union, will say, okay, we can provide 40% of this amount, which is 400,000. The Soda's fund will say, okay, we are going to contribute the rest of the 35% that is coming from that fund that we identify. And then we identify an insurance company that is able to say, okay, we'll cover 15% of the risk. But the total loan amount that is disbursed by the bank is 1 million. And their interest rate is collected on this 1 million. 100,000 is blocked to reduce the risk. They disburse 400,000. That is their direct risk. The rest of the 350 and the 150 is contributed by the fund. Why these two? Once the loan is defaulted, then the 350 from Soda and the 150 from the insurance company are called up to reduce, are redeemed, so that the bank should not lose what it disbursed initially. So, and we're saying that the resources that will be needed are all sons and daughters all over the world, and they will provide capacity building to these people. They will sit in the board of governors of the fund. They will provide guidance on monitoring and evaluation. They will help in mobilizing funding from international organizations. And their services would mostly be volunteering. Little allowances could be considered from the fees that could be raised, and so on and so forth. So what is the configuration? We see that the fund will have a revolving amount that will be sitting right there. There will be a little amount that will be disbursed for technical assistance, of course. They will be volunteering, but we need people that are professionals in agriculture. For me, Richard Chin is a guru in this sector. We all know that we have many such people who can lead us. You know, if we have somebody to manage the fund and coordinate and do reporting for the entire project, then we have to provide a salary for him. Of course, there will be fees for transactions. Okay, so we can, all of that can contribute into the fund. And the sources of these funds, as we have said, will be grants from development agencies, NGOs, long-term loans from investment banks. It could be, you know, partnering with GDDRD, for instance. It could be whatever, the World Bank or whatever. The Kibamke so that can decide to say, okay, we are contributing a certain percentage of our collections into the fund. Individuals of goodwill can get fired up and they say, no, I have to contribute something. The Ministry of Agriculture should be able, from the 10% they are obliged to invest in the investment budget, come to our aid. And this is, we just need to show that we are serious and these things will happen. We have sons and daughters in these places. And of course, the council that is, you know, very close to the people now, from what we hear. They should be able to chip in. They should be able to give machinery. They should be able to drive this with us. And to conclude, I'm simply saying that if we, with dwindling focus on pre-crisis trends, without lamenting over missed opportunities, of course, because we are not starting afresh. We have missed the opportunity, but we have to move forward with malice, like Abraham Lincoln said, towards none, and with charity for all, with an inclusive and dynamic approach, by reconciling this very important moment of science and local traditions and indigenous production methods with technology and new financing mechanisms, so that we'll be giving a voice to the youth who are already making progress but are lacking the right skills and capital, who are the most affected by the crisis but are hopeful, who are bitter but forgiving, who are hardworking but hungry and poor. And so that we'll be engaging a vision that is intense, constructive, exciting, that bears strong messages, clear proposals, concrete solutions for our people. And for the youth, I will leave you with this statement from somebody that is highly venerated, somebody that all of us adore. He was talking to students way back in the 60s. He said this to high school students. Of course, you can see the picture and the name. He asked the question, what is your life's blueprint? And he went ahead to answer the question thus. He said, number one in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your worth, your own somebodyness. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you are nobody. Always feel that you count. Always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance. If you do this, you're not going to think twice to lead us into a crisis. You're going to be able to contribute in the development of our country, of our region, of our tribe. And I believe sincerely, Mr. President, sorry for taking up so much time, that this is just work in progress. It is nothing written on stone. It may not be completely accepted. It may just end at the level of this presentation, but I hope and pray that it should be able to help us think differently towards the sector they call agriculture. Thank you.
So